Hi guys, this is Algebra 7.4. We're learning about solving polynomial equations in factored form. So first off, what is factored form? Factored form is when you take standard form and you break it down into its factors. So into the two parts that could be multiplied together to give you this standard form. Okay, so you'll notice that our last two terms in our factored form multiplied together give us our last term here of standard form. You'll also notice that the first two terms in our factored form multiplied together would give us our first term in standard form. And you'll also notice that our inner terms multiplied together and our outer terms multiplied together and then combined, because they're like terms, would give us negative 2x minus 3x, which would give us negative 5x. So that's how those two are related. And the non-standard form would just be anything where this is just altered so that it's not set equal to 0. Okay, so over here you'll notice that we just moved that 6 over to the other side. So we subtracted 6 from both sides and got it to the non-standard form. The next thing you need to know is the zero product property. So if the product of two real numbers is 0, then at least one of the numbers is 0. So if we have this in factored form, x minus 3 times a quantity x minus 9 equals 0, then you'll know that you can actually set whatever's in parentheses equal to 0, because one of these has to be equal to 0. Maybe both are equal to 0. So we're going to set x minus 3 equal to 0 and x minus 9 equal to 0. So the roots would be x equals 3 and x equals 9, because that would satisfy this equation and make it equal to 0. So keeping in mind the zero product property, you'll notice that we have an equation here, and this is in our factored form. So either r has to be equal to 0 or r minus 10 has to be equal to 0. Okay, so our roots are going to be r equals 10 or r equals 0. So here we're going to look at another equation here in factored form. So we're going to know that either this has to equal 0 or this has to equal 0. So we're going to set each of them equal to 0 and solve. So we can add 4d to both sides. And then we end up with 2 equals 4d. Divide both sides by 4. So d is going to equal 1/2. Over here, same thing. Okay, we could have 4d equals negative 2 because we subtracted 2 from both sides. Divide each side by 4. And now d equals negative 1/2. And those are our roots. There you go. Now we're going to take a look at what this would look like in a graphical form. So if we were to graph x minus 8 times x plus 8, you would end up with a parabola that looked like this. And to find the roots, you're going to look for where that line crosses the x-axis. And here it crosses the x-axis at 8. And here it crosses the x-axis at negative 8. And you'll see if we were to set this binomial equal to 0, we would find that our root is 8, and here our root is going to be negative 8. So that's how you can use a graph and figuring out its x-intercepts to figure out the roots. The final part of today's lesson is probably my favorite part of all of algebra. This is where you have a polynomial and you have to factor it. So you have to figure out what factor these two terms have in common, and you're going to take that out front. Okay, so we're going to do number 26 together. So we have 6d squared minus 21d. The first thing you're going to look for, is there a factor in these numbers that could be taken out front? And I'm seeing 3, so we can take a 3 out front. And then they also have a d in common, so we're going to take 3d out front. And we are going to end up with d